Great, okay, let's kick off. Delighted to present this showcase of Headless Drupal that we built out this year for SSE Airtricity League. I'm going to share presenting duties myself. I was solution architect on this project. I'll go through the background of the project, the architectural decisions. I'll pass it over to Ross just to run through some of the Angular challenges, to Archie to dive into the Drupal build, and then I'll finish it off with the end result. So a little bit about the project itself. I'm not sure you're familiar with the League of Ireland or SSE Airtricity League. So there's 20 clubs, attendance is an average 500 to 5,000 per game. There's around 400 games a year, so it's a large logistical operation. It's run by the FAI, who you'll be familiar with. We're currently playing Denmark next month to try to get to the World Cup. So it's an interesting time for football. So a bit of background on the project. The main goals here were to promote the league, enhance the reputation and profile of the league. And really the main driver was increased attendances, increased interest in the league. And to do that was to create effectively it's a communications portal to be able to push out messaging around everything around football. The previous site was 8 years old. I built it, and by the time that we replaced it, it was terrible. It was an old Joomla website. 2008 it was built, so it was great at the time, but then slowly, fastly died. The FAI put an increased marketing budget around the league for this year. That included the development of the website. It also included dedicated resources for marketing internally, and also increased the number of televised games to 28. So the vision for the FAI in building this, so when they approached Monsoon Consulting to develop out a roadmap, they internally were building out a football management system, which is effectively a system to run, to be the backbone of football in the country. What that meant was that previously, where everything was done on paper, a software system would come in and manage competitions, referees, players, clubs, disciplinary venues, teams, everything. It was licensed from the German FA, so the Germans actually went and built this internally within the association, and then they split out a separate software development company and licensed it out to other football associations. So the FAI are effectively implementing it. So with the system in place, then they needed, this is obviously a back-end system, this is the ERP for the FAI. What they needed was to bring that in front of the customer, and that was to effectively wrap it with the website that you could display all of the correct data. So the roadmap was to build out a website for the League of Ireland, and then to spin up websites for other leagues like the Women's National League, the third level football leagues, and then also they wanted to look at building out mobile applications, iOS, Android as well. So the key challenges on the project, timelines are pretty aggressive. So we started the design phase in December with the launch happening at the end of February. So it was a 12-week end-to-end project, which is very short for a large integration project. Parallel development, the German FA were implementing this system in the FAI at the same time that we were integrating with it. So it was a moving target, which is always difficult. There was a challenge in expertise. No one in the FAI were fully expert within the system because they were learning it at the same time that we were learning it. There was a large content challenge. There's 400 games a season. There's 600-700 players registered. So just the challenge of getting photos of each player, getting player profiles, statistics, and then a logistical challenge for these 400 games. The purpose of the site was to have a live match center where you could follow minute by minute updates on the games. To do that, the FAI had to put a body at every match in every round throughout the year. So you're talking about 400 or 500 games. So again, a reporter updating minute by minute every game, and it's impressive actually that they managed to pull it off. So we looked at this. We looked at the roadmap. We looked at the where they were headed, and then we looked at the nature of the type of builds that are required. And we quickly realized that maybe a headless approach was the right way to go with this. What is headless? So we look at headless as it being decoupling the viewing layer of a website from the backend database, backend administration section. So it's a service-driven architecture where Drupal in this instance is providing services to the front end, to the website, effectively in real time, and it builds out the pages. So it brings in a level of abstraction between front end and the back end. It's just as much as a CMS brought in abstraction when CMSs were invented. This increases that abstraction level even further. So the main benefits to having that level of abstraction, it does set designers and front-end developers free to an extent. They're free from the conventions of the CMS templating system. You can design something completely different. You can design really interactive experiences using mobile apps where you can use the native features of the device. You can really speed up the site. So by building out pages in real time, you're pushing the logic of displaying sites into the browser itself. And then if you have a very streamlined backend, pages get built instantly. So there's a lot of advantages to working with a headless approach. So why did we propose this for the League of Ireland? It made sense, number one, because there was multiple data sources. So we had this football management system that send us all of this data of matches and players and competitions. It wouldn't have made sense to replicate that in Drupal. We also had a requirement for a content management system because there was the need to create views and pages, match reports, match previews. So this idea of a mashup of content that would then render all together on front end lended itself well to a headless approach. There was a need for a relatively unique front end, so the idea of a match center with a match timeline and statistics and gallery, and it's pretty unique. And for that reason, again, headless by setting the designers free, you could deliver a pretty unique application. It required the need to be responsive and in real time, so minute-by-minute updates are just that. The site, the application needs to update every 30 seconds. So again, the idea of having some Ajax real time, where someone can see the matches as they unfold, otherwise without refreshing. Scalability, so there are large peaks and troughs in traffic. So on a Friday evening, there could be collectively around the country 20,000 people at games. A lot of those would have their phones open watching as the matches unfold. So very large peaks in traffic, but then on a Wednesday morning there will be no one on the website. And finally, the idea of reusability. So the roadmap for the FAI was to build out applications for other leagues that they had. So they didn't want to reinvent the wheel each time. So we proposed building out a headless application and then effectively copying and pasting for all their other leagues. So that was the proposition. And then the roadmap that we proposed was to build this in Angular, and then using RESTful web services, fetch content from their football management system. And then also we would implement a content management system on Drupal 8, where we could also fetch relevant content as well. All of that done through a Varnish caching proxy. And that was a key part of the architecture, because again, for reasons of scale and performance. Ionic was a key part of the roadmap, the idea that you can build out an Angular application and then essentially just wrap it up in an Ionic package and deploy it to Android and iOS. Again, means that you don't need to put in significant budgets in developing mobile applications. So this was the roadmap we proposed. Phase 1 was building out the application for SSE Airtricity League. And phase 2 was working through the Women's National League and terminal football sites as well. So how does Angular work? Ross will go into more detail on it, but effectively from an architectural perspective, a user will hit the website, download the Angular app to their device, and effectively then it's saved in local storage on your device or on your desktop. And from there, it renders in real time, pulling data from the backend systems and builds out the page on the fly. Also go into detail on how it's a single page app in more detail. But the fact that everything is saved and served from your local storage means that it is ultra fast. The infrastructure, the server topology is a bit different for something like this. So typically you might have a back-end server and maybe a front-end server or even just a single server for everything. For this we needed a server solely just to render Angular. We needed a server solely just to deliver the CMS. We also needed a caching server. So they have a virtualized infrastructure in the FAI, so they were able to spin us up 3 virtual machines where we created these caching servers. Just to talk about the data coming from the different systems. So the football manager system, as I mentioned, that was we were going to match competitions, clubs, players, teams, statistics, etc. And then for the content management system, it's effectively the editorial side of it. So it's creating news and uploading videos, match previews and reports, and implementing Instagram. So part of that, as I mentioned, part of the marketing effort from the FAI this year was to increase the number of televised games to 28 games. So there's a huge amount of video content that's available on the site from RTE. So the ability to be able to embed that on the site and render it on all the various pages on the site was fantastic. The key challenge architecturally here is developing the relationships between the 2 data sources. So how do you create a match report that's tied to the match ID in a different system? So that was always the challenge with this is either directly integrating your CMS with your FMS, or coming up with something a little bit easier and slightly creative along those lines. Great, so we got down to it. In December we started analysing what web services we were going to retrieve from this football management system. They had out of the box 20 services, and my job on this project was solution architect. So it was my job to make sense of this and to work out what was feasible and what wasn't feasible and where the gaps were. So we worked through this, and interestingly, yes, we didn't necessarily understand how their system works internally, but you have a view of how their system works based on how these web services are actually outputted. You can kind of get a sense of the structures. And again, it was a learning experience for both ourselves and the FAI. So Headless technically offers up freedom for UI designers and front-end developers in that, again, they're not constrained by a content management system. That being said, you're potentially freed up by it. You're very much dependent on what you can get from the back-end systems. So Patricia down the back was the designer of this project, and will constantly come to me to ask, can I put this on that page, or can I put this on that page? And my answer was usually, potentially we can. It depends on whether we can get it from either of the systems. And a lot of the time, it was no, because we would have to do a significant content gathering exercise. So it's something to be aware of, that data needs to come from somewhere. And obviously we can include it in the design, but we need to obviously just work through where exactly it's going to be rendered from. So we decided on Angular as a front-end JavaScript framework, and I'll pass it over to Ross, who can talk through what Angular is.
Well, one definition is it's a JavaScript MVC framework to create single-page data-driven applications. So what do we mean by single-page? Well, traditionally with a website, you load the web page, you click on a link, you load a brand new web page with AngularJS. You just load one web page once, and the data is updated by AJAX calls. So the header and footer remains the same. They may update specific content in one table or the main content, and they change the view to a new page. It's data driven, so it doesn't have to be, but it's very good for that. It offers lots of features to process data and manage data on the site. So that kind of leads into why we use it as well, because we had multiple data sources, and we wanted to process that data a little bit more to fill it out, change the presentation depending on the results from multiple different services we're retrieving from both Drupal and football management system. The live match center, we wanted to provide minute-by-minute updates, so with Angular, that's quite straightforward to do. And then for a mobile app, as Daniel mentioned, that was part of the project vision, the AngularJS, it's easy to drop that into an iconic app. So that's the what and why. These are some of the main features of AngularJS. It's MVC, so follows that architectural pattern we're pretty familiar with. Separation of concerns between model, view, and controller. It provides routing features and services for sharing data across your app. Templates, the templating system, which, you know, when you look at it, the templates are very similar to PHP templates, just the syntax is different. They use expressions like this with the curly braces rather than the PHP declarations. There's two-way data binding, which is probably one of the first things you notice when you start working with Angular. It's really kind of cool. Data is updated instantly throughout the application immediately, depending on. So if the data is updated by your API service, it's updated on the front end immediately. If it's updated by some user input, it's updated in your application logic somewhere, and vice versa. So that was excellent for the minute-by-minute updates. That's what made that very easy. Directives, these are very much an Angular thing, and what Angular is doing with these is they're extending HTML, and they're making it behave a lot more like a server-side language in a way. You can put in if statements and for each loops. You can create your own directives, your own HTML elements, or your own HTML attributes. Really fills out the functionality of HTML. I've heard it described as like if they were building HTML from the beginning, they would have built in some of the features that Angular has kind of built in. Filters are small little JavaScript functions you can use to change the output of data on the front end. Very useful. Dependency injection, so you can load certain pieces of code into your controllers or directives very easily. And then it's modular, so you can add modules to your app, which is excellent as well. They're almost always free. One example of, there's lots of modules you'll use in your app, but one example is Angular UI Bootstrap, which is built by the Angular UI team. It basically is taking all the Bootstrap components and you can put JavaScript components and building them in an Angular way, which is very, it's actually more helpful than you think, because it's very easy to bind Angular objects to a component and Bootstrap. So pagination becomes very easy. You take the pagination component from Bootstrap, very simply just fits together with your objects that you're getting from your API service. Okay, so some sample code, I'll run through these. So this is basically where you start. The AngularJS, your Angular app is going to have index.html, and here you bootstrap the app with ng app at the top. You load the Angular framework, any other modules you want to use, so UI Bootstrap or Angular root. You attach a controller to the view. You don't have to do it this way, there's other ways you can do it. You can include a parser for your header, so it's like similar to the templating languages, your templating systems that you're used to. This is just a simple example of like a two-way data binding. It's one of the first things you see. So like this is an input field on your web page where you fill in maybe your name, and immediately you'll see it updated in the expressions. So this would be in your JavaScript, your app.js. You will declare your Angular app, load any modules into it. So we have ng root at the top, which we'll use for routing. You'd also put in Bootstrap UI or whichever ones you're using. Example of a controller, you declare a controller, and then so any objects in your controller will be made available to your view. Very simple demonstration. Okay, so yeah, there's a config function in Angular. This is where you'll do your routing, and this is where basically an example of what you have. So you'll have the root provider. You'll say when you're at the domain root, serve the home HTML view, and use the home controller. Then you can also use things like wildcards. So you'll say, okay, so when from your domain you have competition and a wildcard, which you'll call SEO name, an ID, a string with ID followed by another wildcard, which you'll call competition ID. Serve this view comp HTML and use this controller. And if none of these views match, redirect back to the home page. You can do something with the whole page as well. These are directives, so like as I mentioned, you have these are core directives. All the core directives are ng, so you have ng repeat, just like for each loop, PHP, ng if. And basically, Angular just processes the template and renders it accordingly. And then you have this is like a custom one we built for the League of Ireland that matches. So we passed the data in. We had some parameters as well, depending on what it was. We displayed match table differently, results, fixtures, sizes of tables. So some common issues you face immediately when you start working with Angular. Cores, so it's cross-origin resource sharing, which a lot of browsers implement as a security policy. So if you want to fetch data from an API that's not on your domain, you need to make sure Cores is enabled. So sometimes you might be waiting for that to happen, and so that's you can get like a little extension for your browser to bypass that while it's developed, but it needs to be enabled at some stage. Dependency injection, code modification. So there's two ways to actually inject dependency in AngularJS. And this first one is how it's usually done, or you know the documentation. But if you're going to minify your JavaScript, it's going to throw a lot of errors. You might be wondering why it's happening. It's usually because you haven't used the second option, which is a array notation where the dependencies are passed in an array, just like that. Yeah, pretty URLs. So out of the box Angular, normally with routing, you'll get pages like this with this hash band, which is pretty horrible and not good for SEO. So you can get around that by using location provider, another service from Angular, and that will get rid of that. It's pretty straightforward. You just need to do a few things to get the URLs working correctly. Using jQuery, should you use it with AngularJS? Well, jQuery Lite is actually built in with AngularJS, so you can use it. And if you want to load the full jQuery library on top of it, you could. But it's not the Angular way, it's not going to work very well because jQuery usually uses the document.ready event, and that only happens once throughout the whole user experience on the app. So you really want to use Angular's approach by using directives and filters to manipulate the DOM. It'll make things easier. Even if you're using a jQuery plugin, you normally have to write a directive to get it to work rather than using the jQuery metadata that it suggests. SEO and social sharing. Okay, so like if you think about it, an Angular app, it's just this index page that doesn't have a lot on it. It's fetching all the information somewhere else. So how do search engines index it and find out what the content is? Well, fortunately, most of the search engines are called up and they execute the JavaScript and render the page properly, so it's indexed correctly. But still, you'll find a lot of social media bots are indexing the site, or when you're sharing content, it doesn't render the view properly. So to get around that, you can use a node server, a pre-render, which basically creates static pages for all the bots that are indexing the site. There's the free version of GitHub, or also the managed service you can use. Aggressive browser caching deployment. So yeah, with Angular, there's a lot of assets being used. There's all the HTML templates, as well as CSS and JavaScript. Whenever you make a change, you need your user to refresh the browser to see those changes, which is never going to work because they'll never do that. So one way around that is basically just by putting a little query string on any calls to any assets. So a little timestamp here, and that just forces the browser to fetch the new version and to have issues with it. main ones I can think of. So I'll pass it over to Archie now. We'll talk about the Drupal implementation.
Hi, I'm going to talk about general Drupal headless implementation here. So first, why Drupal is good for headless. Drupal is one of the best solutions for content management on the market right now, so no need to talk more about it. All required features for a simple headless site are already built. Even in core, you don't even need to download the modules to do that. It doesn't require any programming skills for a very simple backend for a headless site. All you need to be able to configure a few content types and views. That's it. So, it's easily adjustable for multiple purposes. Imagine you need one format for your mobile app and then another format of requests for your Angular app. It's easily adjustable just in Vue without doing a lot of development. The site itself could be easily converted to a full site if you have a backend and content on it. Imagine you have a mobile app, then you need a full site, but you want to build it on Angular. You can just add a theme, put something on top of it, and you get a full site based on your backend. And it has a built-in cache, which is very important for decoupled sites. Now, this is a very high-level instructions on how to set up very simple backend for headless. First, of course, create needed content types. Then you need to enable RESTful Web Services module, which comes as part of the core. Then create a view and create display, REST export, configure the style output of it, add expose filters, pagination filters, whatever you need there. Then basically configure permissions to not allow users to see the content types when they just go by the URL. And that's it, you're done. You can now request for data just using the URLs we provided in your view. What is provided by CMS REST services? Few things: you can retrieve data, you can retrieve aggregated data, and you can create data and delete content. And if the first one is very simple, you can do it even with views, the two. Others require some more development or configuration, so it requires some more expertise. Here's a few snippets that might help you to do stuff. First one is, how do you render the view programmatically if you need to output it through your own controller? So it's not just throwing view out and it works. Let's do it like that. Second one is how to return any data in JSON format on any stage of executing your controller. So this way you can format the responses back to Angular JSON format. And the third one is how do you basically redirect somewhere from any stage. In our case scenario, that was used when you edit content on the backend side and back to the Angular side immediately. Common Drupal gotchas. First, use views cache properly. So if you output some content, you need this output to be cached. And Drupal very good, Drupal 8 very good with it. Cache is reset when you modify the node that is cached for this view. So then if you request your data with some parameters like category or number per page, be very careful with these parameters, whitelist them if you can. So it's just a general secure gotcha. Properly configure access to the site. I'll repeat myself. Make sure content is not visible if you don't want it to be visible. Make sure the URLs you provided has required authentication, because you potentially don't want users to just go by URL and get all the data they might get there. Aggregate results together where possible. On some pages, you might have few blocks of content that comes from different requests on the Drupal backend. It might make sense to combine them into one controller, into one request, and then so your front-end system will do just one request instead of 4 or 5. This definitely increases performance. Unify where possible. So make sure all your requests have the same structure, the same parameters, names, and even combine requests together if you can do that, which is with various parameters you put in it. Create documentations. Very important to keep doing documentations from very early stage of developing the project to keep track of that, so you can easily share your API to any other front-end providers. And use front-end links for linking CMS and front-end system. What does it mean? If you work with Angular and Drupal, you're still modifying, creating your content on Drupal, and then it goes to Angular by the request. So we found it useful for us to put the edit or create links right on the Angular side. So you can click edit on Angular side, move back to Drupal, hit save, and then redirect back to Angular. So for content editors, it's absolutely seamless process. They don't even know that they work on two different sides. So it was very cool. 8 REST API, which will give you a very good kickstart on how to start doing your decoupled Drupal API.
Thanks, Archie. So the end results. Site went live at the end of February, so that's an example of the homepage. As Archie mentioned, the idea of aggregating services coming from Drupal. On the homepage, we have news, we have Instagram, we have videos. Initially, that was 5 or 6 different services to Drupal. Archie aggregated them all into a single column, which again helps in render, helps in page speed. And you can see fixtures and results on the right, so again, it's a nice matchup between 2 different content sources. The live match center, which we talked about, this is a key part of the system. And again, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that effectively are like that at a ground on a Friday evening, checking to see the scores of all the other games. Not needing to refresh, with two-way data binding, it automatically updates with the scores. Mobile first was a key part of it. So again, competitions. There's 15 different competitions on the site. Primary division was the main one, but there's cups, there's leagues, there's underage competitions, all that. So the match center itself is the key part of it, and quite a complex beast. Different states of games, pre-match, during a game, post-match. You know, if there's injury time, extra time. So if it's a cup, if it's a league. So there's a lot of complexity around building out that, even just this page. And again, works very well on mobile. And the interesting thing, because of the live updates on mobile or on Angular, is that during a game you can see live statistics because the reporter on the ground is entering minute by minute what's happening. And you also see what the reporter is, in terms of editorial, is saying, what is also saying what's happening. An example of a news page. So again, editor is creating this in Drupal and it's rendered in real time within the Angular app. And as I mentioned, RTE and video highlights. So there's just a huge repository of video content down on the system. Archie mentioned the site administration and the editorial workflow. We built out we replicated the Angular app and housed it under an admin subdomain. And we added add news, edit news, add video buttons on the top. 2 reasons for that. The first one is it's very easy for an editor just to log in, hit the page or the plug or the competition that he wants to add news to, and then clicks add news. The second one is it's an easy way to tie the football management entity IDs to the Drupal entity IDs. And as you can see for this match, you can see the match ID at the top. So when we click add news, it passes that match ID in the get parameter. And that's then saved in Drupal. And then once someone clicks add news, they hit the Drupal site and then they add news. Great, so results. Site went live on time, on budget, which is always healthy. After 6 months live, it's over 2 million unique page views, so pretty popular. Again, high peaks and traffic, particularly on Friday evenings for live games. And finally, just some general learnings on the architecture. Obviously, Archie and Ross went through the gotchas on the particular platforms. From my perspective, why propose headless? Headless made sense for this scenario. It doesn't always make sense. So multiple data sources means, yeah, headless is a good approach. We recently rebuilt the Monsoon website. We didn't use Angular as it just didn't make sense. We built it on Drupal. So, same level of effort. This is debatable possibly, but I believe it probably would have been the same effort to do it all in Drupal. We just had different problems by maybe separating it and doing it partially in Angular, partially in Drupal. That might be different for maybe more complex projects. Relationships between foreign entities is an architectural challenge. Initially, we were going to integrate the football management system with the CMS directly for lookups, but we managed to creatively get around with the admin section. And finally, cache is key. You need aggressive caching with Varnish in this instance. Again, if there's 2,000 people on the site and you have numerous backend calls, you're going to overload the backend system pretty quickly with requests. So Varnish cache really makes it safe. That's great. That's our headless journey, our first Angular side, our first headless side. We were very happy with the outcome. Any questions for myself, Archie, or Ross? Yes.
Yeah, I've got one question. Now these days, React is also getting very popular. And well, is there any particular reason why you decided to go for Angular instead of React?
There wasn't.
No, there wasn't. There's like, I know what you mean. Like React is really kind of the build case at the moment. Yeah. But at the time, we went with Angular because we knew it fit into. We could work with Ionic with it and create a mobile app in the future if they wanted that. So, yeah, I think if I was personally, I'd like to work more with React as well.
Yeah, okay, sure. Sorry. Okay, cool. Another question, I've heard that you are using lots of various services.
Yes.
So that seems to be like more microservice architecture. How are you dealing with all these services? I mean, if one of those services is down, how are you going to tackle that? Is there like an API, gateway somewhere in between, or?
So that's where Varnish kicks in. So he expires on that cache if there's nothing to fetch in the backend system because the backend system is down. Then it serves what's in the cache. That's the theory. It hasn't happened yet, so I haven't seen it. But in general, like in general terms, that's what you would want to know.
In terms of like,
you're developing with Java front end. You have to consider developing with Java back end as well. So when you utilize your own content system.
Because we're a Drupal house, we didn't. But obviously that's something that we could have looked at. The FAI had a lot of Drupal applications, so they were interested in having a Drupal application because they have the skills to support it. So, and their editorial staff know how to have their content.
Are the features provided by the Angular application capable provided by the Drupal content?
In general, they possibly are. The two-way data binding just makes it very easy for the line updates, for example. So I think that's an interesting point that it was the same effort, possibly. We just ran into different problems. So that the problems we ran into on Angular wasn't necessarily around the live updates, but we ran into more issues in terms of the routing and the SEO sharing and pre-render, for example. Whereas if we built it on Drupal, we wouldn't have had those issues, but we would have had other issues. So it's, I possibly think it was the same.
In terms of accessibility, that's presumably built on Drupal 8.
Yes.
And that's WCAG 2.0 is accessible. And then you abstracted the content, let's say, because you want to use that as a content repository to use Angular for the rendering.
yeah, Drupal returns just raw data. It's a JSON format, no HTML.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So then in terms of Angular, was there any work done, or does anything need to be done in terms of accessibility for screen readers and things, or was that part of the brief?
No, there was some HTML returned in some of the JSON objects, yeah. So some of the properties, like for domain content and a news article, one of the properties had HTML and the Angular app ended up.
There was no specific requirements on accessibility. It's something that we kind of built out on the Angular side, you know, if there was specific requirements on it. I think with the short timeline as well, it was a case of getting decided quickly.
It looks great, well done.
How do you handle authentication?
Yes. So there's no sessions, there's no live sessions, you don't log into the front end, so we didn't have to tackle it. We have a project coming up where we are going to tackle that, which will be interesting.
So connection event.
For the administrator, as I mentioned, there's an admin subdomain. They hit that, it's essentially just a HTTP authentication shared across the editors. That gives them access to click the add use buttons, but when they go through the Drupal, they need to sign into Drupal. So gotcha. I'll make it sound great. It's two-way authentication. Yeah. But yeah, I'm really interested in tackling that. And it has been tackled. There's lots of dashboards that are, you know, Angular style dashboards that really fuel a lot of data and, you know, it's tied into authentication services. So there are easy solutions for it. We just have to get to that. Yes.
So this exercise at the start, so you might have answered this already. Did you make the football management system as well, or is it completely separate systems?
Completely separate system. So the German Football Association built it internally, and then they licensed it out to the FAI.
Do you know how to print them out of interest? Is it Drupal?
No, it's .NET. Yeah.
Did you have to ask for various amendments to it, or did they have those services available already that do this to you on the page?
So they have a website, foosball.de. And that site is effectively built using all these web services. We required 3 additional services that they custom developed. But in general, you know, it was a like-for-like implementation between the German FA and the Irish FA.
And is the architecture of foosball.de the same then?
That's Angular as well.
So Angular but is it, it's not.
No, it's not Drupal.
But it's an Angular front end with the football management system on the back end.
Yes, exactly.
Was there much learnings to be had from that in terms of how you implemented things, in terms of live match tracker, things like that, or was it completely different?
They implemented it completely differently, and they weren't involved at a consultative level, so we were kind of shooting in the dark to an extent. We were learning it as we went.
Good. Did you look at other live match trackers in terms of how they were implemented?
Yeah, we built one on the FAI website using the UEFA services, so we were relatively familiar with the idea of it. What we don't have on the FAI site is the idea of two-way data binding, so I think that was definitely the next step in increasing it.
Great, we're on time, I think. So.
Cool.
For the two-way input. Sorry, for the two-way input. So, your app pointing to the FAIs.
Yes.
So it's a function of web system where the FMS is pushing out that a change in matrix model, or how is it?
I believe we're retrieving it, aren't we?
Yeah, well, they made it only available to our Varnish server, right? And then we have cores enabled on our Varnish server, so we're only able to retrieve it from our domain. But if you can open the JSON object in any browser and look at it if you want to look at a JSON object. But
and do we fetch it?
So when you make a HTTP request, you can say whether or not you want to cache it or not. So for the updates, we don't cache it, and it's like every 30 seconds.
Yes.
Do you look at WebSockets to do the polling or like that, or what?
We didn't actually know. We just used
just one polling.
Yeah. It seems to work well. Like there was no the match updates work really.
It would be an interesting way
on the timeline, like everywhere. Great.